what do we know about Mount Nebo? Mount Nebo has a very long tradition. It's mentioned in the Bible in Numbers as the place to which the Israelites came after they had been wandering in the wilderness for 40 years, and finally defeated many of their enemies across the Jordan. That would be in Edom and now in the area of Ammon, which is now where we are in Jordan, northern Jordan. And the tribes gathered, the Israelites gathered along the shores of the Jordan River, and then after they sang, they recounted their history, which we remember, history is theology, so they were recounting their theological understandings of God, celebrated, and then it said, according to Numbers, and actually in Deuteronomy as well, which we get the description of the death of Moses, he ascends this mountain. He sees the promised land, which he has been told he will not be able to enter, and he dies. We do not know, according to the Bible, where his burial or tomb is, so this is as much as we have in terms of tradition. So as we'll see as we walk through this, they mentioned Moses is incredibly important as a prophet of Judaism. Not only is Moses associated with leading the Israelites out of Egypt, but there's also an important role of Moses as a protagonist in guiding and leading the Israelites through the wilderness for 40 years of wandering. As I mentioned before, the numbers are highly symbolic, and many would argue, probably rightly so, not to take them in a very literal sense. 40 years, we know, represents a generation, and it's sort of a completeness or a cycle or a season. So 40 years would have represented that generation that came out of Israel, or out of Egypt. And that is what we hear quite clearly debated or depicted, as that generation would not be able to enter the promised land themselves because of their moaning and groaning and griping. So this is important to keep in mind. And part of that included Moses. So even though Moses played such a pivotal role, that Moses was not allowed to enter the promised land according to the tradition. So the story goes that the Israelites, after 40 years and finally coming across Transjordan, which would be Jordan today, northern Jordan, they gathered on the shore of the Jordan River. They celebrated their story, especially the story of liberation, their story of Exodus, God leading them out of the land of the oppressors. And this is important because, remember, story is theology. So they were recounting or even praising and exploring their own theology by the recounting of these tales. And part of that then included worship and singing songs, and we also see the transfer of power between Moses and the mantle going from Moses to his successor Joshua. And remember, if you know a little bit of the language, Joshua in Hebrew is actually the word that's in Greek is Jesus, basically. The English version of that is Jesus. So it's an interesting transfer of the person who would then lead the Israelites across the Jordan River to the promised land. The important thing is that he transfers this power, and according to God, was not allowed to go into the promised land, but he is allowed to see it one time before he dies. And he comes up to the top of Mount Nebo, where we are today, and he looks over the promised land. That will be behind us, and on the other side of the mountains would be Jericho, and the West Bank has Palestine and Israel. So many times today you can see Jerusalem from this point. Needless to say, you get a pretty amazing spectacular view. incredible views, and also the commemoration of a prophet who still holds a lot of power in Islam, Christianity, and especially in Judaism. So those of you who study Jewish law, study Jewish tradition, especially even beyond the Bible, realize that Moses gets a lot of press in the Midrash and the Mishnah and the Talmud, and so retains status as sort of the founding figure and the receiver of the law of Moses, which was given on Mount Sinai. So this is the central core of Judaism. So at least we have a bit of information about that. It's much more than the Ten Commandments, although we often get that depiction of the Ten Commandments in films and movies, the tablets that are given to Moses, but the understanding is that Moses was actually given an extensive law code, multiple codes that are recorded in the Bible. So these are all part of the Torah, or the law, rather than just simply 10 commandments. And those who study Jewish law know that those laws expand as Jewish tradition goes further. But I better get out of here. Alright, shukran. Masalamat. Hasta la vista.